Hello everyone, welcome to QStack. So today we are going to create a backend automation framework which utilizes Spring Boot. In this video, I am going to cover automation of a simple GET request. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm creating a new project I'm using IntelliJ as so let me create a new Maven project. I will name it as a test automation backend. Project is created. Now, before beginning, I would like to tell you that as part of this project, we need to have we'll be using certain libraries for which we are supposed to add certain dependencies in the pom.xml. Let me copy those dependencies from existing pom.xml. I will provide the list of these dependencies in the description box. So let me first tell you I have these APIs under demo stub folder, this get employee API. When I hit this API, it gives me all the employee records present for this API. Now this is an open API which I have got from a website. I will share the link as well. For the demo purpose, this API is available in public. Now this is another API in which if we provide the employee ID, it gives the response, which it gives the details for this specific employee. The employee name, employee salary, employee age, profile image if any. Then we also have a post request. So if we do a post, so a record would be created. Okay, since I have already uploaded this report. So as you can see, the record is created and we have received the ID 497. So these are the three basic requests which we are trying to automate. To keep the video short, I'll be automating only GET request as part of this video and we'll be automating post in the next. So first thing which you will have to provide is a config property file. You can provide it in the main repo, mentioning as the QA config. In this, you have to provide the host, which in this case will be this URL. So you can keep all the which are having different host address property files. We of these variables to fetch the host address or base URIs for each services. Now next thing what we need to do is a config file. We need to create certain packages. The first package is endpoints. Package we'll be going to keep all the endpoints. Next package will be helper methods. All the helper methods package. The next will be config. Now under the config folder, we'll be creating one base test class and one config test class. We can name it as a test config. Now, what's the purpose of using this test config class and base test class? So, like I said, we will Spring framework, and in Spring concept called Java Beans, we have an option to create bean which will be available throughout the execution. You have to initialize the object in a before class or delete the objects at the end of the execution. So we are going to create beans for all the common. It will be more clear as we go for declaring beans in this format. Under test config, we and in this script, we are going to auto wire those beans as we. So before that, let me just next step would be after declaring the endpoint. Declare the endpoint. I'm going to create a class endpoint. And I'm going to create it for the service info. Here I'm going to put public static final string. We get employee. Now we have to write a few help functions. For that, we will be writing an test client helper. Now this function, this class will create all my REST methods like get, post, and I'll be using this class object only. Hit any get or post or put or request. So let me create. First of all, this will be the request specification object. Then it will be having a get request method. Which will return the response object. Similarly, we will be creating for now we'll be creating a request build class to build the request and the package builder. Here I'll be defining all the various components which are used to define a get request, HTTP request, like the base URI, then the header, then we have body, with these values I'll be creating functions for the same. Now I'm going to create a function which sets the base URI string of this class with the string provided. Yes, we are going to set the poly. Next is we are going to set the header. I'm going to initialize this now, or let's just say header. By this method. Now, as it's there in the builder pattern, I'm going to create a build method which is going to declare an object of a REST endpoint. An object of request. So now it has asked me to create a constructor having an argument as a request. So I'm clicking on yes. It has already created a constructor in client helper with an argument of a request builder object. Now what we need to do, we need to initialize the request specification object. We need to set the base this. Specification builder dot. Now here we have to fetch the base URI from the builder class. So one thing is we write the getter methods on these objects, or we can simply use Django getter annotation. So as soon as annotation, be able to get any of the like this request filter or get base, and then this is set. The next thing is we need to check if the header, which means the request builder dot get header. This is not null. We are going to set this. get it in. Next is you're going to for the body. This is null specification dot body set to request builder dot get body. So why we are using this builder pattern? We are using pattern because it creates, it gives us an opportunity. You can specify optional arguments while creating an object. You can study the builder pattern in detail. Data available. In case you are not familiar with this pattern, please put a comment in the comment below in this video, and if I get more than 10 or 15 comments, I will. So here you can just consider that we are using pattern so that we can provide either of these parameters and we can skip either parameters. For example, if my request has base URI, header, body, and I want to provide the body, I don't want to provide any header, so I can skip that. Seeing that when I'm going to write the test case for this. So, but before that, let me do the Spring setup. For the helper functions and extending the base. Okay, now like I said, I'm going to create the test config class. In test config class, we'll be handling all the bean objects. We are going to use the annotation properties. Here you can specify the property files that you can read as a bean object, and that will be available to you throughout the execution. So here we are going to qa.config file name. qa.config properties. Next annotation will be configuration. Here we have to initialize objects, all the common classes, request builder, this we just have to return a new object of request builder, which will be having an empty construct, no arguments constructed. You can do this for all the common classes which you want to execute. Now let's go back to our base test. For using Spring, we to extract test.g. Spring context. And here we are going to provide the context configuration. In this, we have to provide the classes which we are considering as the test config. Here we have just one class. Now we are going to use the annotation auto wire. Then we are going to create the object with the object which we want to create. So now this object can be created without the help of without either a need of visualizing it again. Next, I'm going to auto-wire the environment variable. We are going to need the environment variables as well. Now, this statement means that all the variables specified under QA.config.property files will be available via this object by simply environment.getProperty. Now, to handle the response, create another response helper. So in response helper class, we will be creating a hash map to save the response from various tests. You can set a response based upon the service name in this map. Let me write the code for that. If this is not equals to null, sorry, if this is equals to null, that means the response map has not been initialized. So we are going to initialize it. And then we are going to put the key and the value. That's it. Now to get the response map, either we can write a public getter method or we can make use of the getter annotation in the logbook job. So now let's create our first test case. We are all set with the common library set. Now we are going to create a first test script that will be validating a get request. So for that, the first thing what we have to do is create a test class under test.java. Let's name it validate employee details. Now this will be extending the base test class. We are extending the test case with the base test class so that we can utilize all the objects created in the base test class in our test script. Let me rename it. All right. So first we will be writing our test case. Validate get employee. So for validating get employee, validate get employee status. To validate the employee status, first we have to perform a get operation. So to perform the get request, we will be needing the host address, the request method, headers if any, and body if any. So let's go back to our Postman. We'll be going to validate this get request. So for this, let me copy the host address first. So this is the host address, which is highlighted over here. And then this is the endpoint for this request. So let me copy the host address and put this in the QA files. Okay, it's already there. So now let's come back to our test script. The next thing what we have to do is add the endpoint. So we are going to open the endpoints.employee. Here we have already added this endpoint. So to create the get request, we will be using the request builder object which we have created base test. Now we need to set the base URI. For setting the base URI, we'll have to fetch the base URI. So for fetching the base URI, we have to use the syntax, then specify the property which you want to read. Now this is showing me error because I have not specified this as protected in the base test class. Once I have specified these variables as protected, they will be available for use in their subclasses or child classes. So now the error has removed. So after setting the base URI, what other methods we can do? We can set the headers as well. But right now we don't have any specific header, so we will be skipping that. So we can set the body, but again for a get request we don't require any body, so we'll just going to build this, and then we have to perform the get operation. For that we have to write this get request. Now this will give me a response which I can store in the response map. Yes, but before this response map also we have to make it available under the base test class. So let me do the changes for that. I'm going to make this response helper extend the base test class, and under test config I'm going to define another bean for response helper. Which will be returning a new instance of response helper. And then I'm going to auto wire this the response helper object. Now this object will be accessible inside my test class. Response helper dot set response map employee map. Key would be the response which we have just received. Again, I forgot to make it as protected. So while using the Spring framework, you have to be very careful about the access specifiers. Now we have captured our response. It's time to validate. So let me write an assertion for that. Assert dot assert equals response helper get response map dot get dot get status code. This will give me the status of the return response, and then I'm going to compare it with 200. So now let's execute this test case. Let's enable this Lombok settings. Now it's going to execute our first request. Let's see. All right. It's giving us an error in the application context. So we receive this kind of error when we have not specified the annotations properly respected to Spring context. So let's revisit that. In test config, you have to specify the property source and configuration. This is done. In the base test class, you have to specify the context configuration. Let's see what error we have got. Fail to load the application context. We scroll down, it says file not found exception. It's unable to find the property files. So let's just see the path of the property file. Okay, we have created it here. We have to create the property file under main resources. So let me place it onto this. Let's do a maven clean and then we will execute. Let's execute this. Okay, so now it has passed. Let's go back and see our test case. We have validated the assertion that the status should be 200 and it's 200. Now we are going to validate a field in the response. Let's say we are going to validate the employee name. Should be Tiger Nixon. So for that, we will be writing another test case, another test. For simplicity, we are going to use only one assertion and one test. Date employee name So like I said, we are storing the response in the response map. So we don't have to do a get again. We can just get the response which we have already captured. Response helper dot get response map get. We just need to provide the map name. Can we need to provide the path for the response field which we want to validate. In this case, it will be data.employee underscore name. This will be data.employee name, and this should be equal to okay. First, let's save this in a string. Actual now we're going to assert equals actual employee name should be Tiger Nixon. Now let's execute this. So it says validate employee name failed. Now let's see why it has failed. At line number 17, we have received null pointer exception, which means it's unable to find this path. So we have committed a mistake. That's why it's failing. While creating a GET request, we have just provided the host address. We have not provided any endpoint. So let me just provide the endpoint. So we are going to fetch the endpoint from the endpoints employees class dot get employee, plus we are going to provide the path parameter also 1. Now let's execute it again. So this time it says unknown host. So let's debug this. First of all, let's just see what string creating. The string is HTTP dummy REST API example v1 employee 1 API v1 employee 1. Okay, so we are missing one slash over here. Let me correct that in the property files. The property files is in my resources. Now let's execute it once again. So this time it has successfully passed. But again, it's giving the error at line number 18. says null pointer exception, so still it is not able to find this data. Okay, it's executing this employee name first and then the employee status, so that is why it's not finding it. To rectify this, we need to set the priority of this to be 1 and priority of the case to be 0, so that the employee status should false. Now it's first executing employee status and then it's executing the employee name, and it has executed the response string which is print. So now we have successfully validated the get request status code to be 200. Then in the next test we have validated the employee name to be equal to tiger.nixon. So this is it for this video. Thank you.